It's the number one thing that causes stress in the family. It's often listed as the top reason for a divorce. It's the number one idols in our life. It's also the number one thing that Jesus gave the most parables about. There's over 2,000 verses in our scriptures about it. That's more than faith and prayer combined. It's statistically the thing that Jesus brought up the most. So it's very clear that God has a lot to say about this thing, about this topic, and yet it's often the one thing we want to hear from God on the least, and that's money. Here's my point for this whole series. The whole reason we are putting together this short little e-equipping, 4 sessions, online digital resources to help you out is for this one big idea. And it's this, is that God isn't against you having money, but he is oh so much against money having you. Another way to think about it is that money matters, how we give it, how we spend it, how we invest it, what we do with money matters. And the whole point of these 4 sessions is to maybe provide a way for us to better understand how to handle our money matters in a way that honors God. And some of you are probably already thinking, here we go again. See, I knew it. The church just wants more of my money. And my response to that is oftentimes a couple things. Number one is, at least our church, we don't want necessarily more of your money. We want your heart because God wants your heart. And one of the greatest things that battles God to sit in the throne of your heart is money. But we say that phrase, the church just wants more of my money, yet at the same time too, have you ever thought about that, about Target, Costco, Bass Pro, car dealership? Well, the whole reason they're in business is because they want my money. I bet you haven't thought of it that way because I know I rarely do either. It's usually when somebody wants it to be handled in a way that's different than ours. And the crazy thing is Jesus doesn't really need our money. He wants us. He wants our full surrender to him more than anything else. And our goal and our heart for you is that to parallel and mimic Jesus, is to fully give our allegiance to him in all areas of our life because we believe that he is king over all. And so with that said, in order for our hearts to be fully disciplined and transformed, we want to partner with you in this resource to better understand and utilize our stewardship and money in a way that honors God, provides freedom, and expands his kingdom for his glory. I'll start with Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 and 10. It says this, it says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to the overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine." If we just kind of face reality, is most of us don't know how to do that. Most of us maybe struggle. Nobody taught us how to go about managing our money in a way that it honors God well. And that's the aim. That's the goal of this resource, is to provide practical tools to help you get a better handle on those things. And so as we dive in, I just want to set the table with maybe a couple terms that you'll hear over these sessions and kind of what we mean by them. Number one is the term generosity. And when we say the word generosity, we typically talk about giving or tithing our finances predominantly back to and through the local church. That we give back to God and we give away what is actually God's already, that he has entrusted us to steward it. It can often mean money, but there are other things like your skills, your wisdom, your time, your network, your experiences. They're all things that we can be generous with. One of the other things we're going to dive into is the difference between being rich and being wealthy. That being rich is the money you make, but being wealthy is the money and the investment you make with it. I know that some of us, the idea of being really rich, but they're not wealthy. I know people who have a lot of money coming into their lives, but they probably spend it all, or they have no meaning or purpose of what it does. They've missed that opportunity to be a good steward with those finances. And on the opposite end, there are some who are not rich by the world's standards, but they will tell you they are some of the most fulfilled, some of the most wealthy people that you could ever meet. One of the other words is like a 4-letter word when it comes to our finances sometimes. That's the word budget. What a budget really is telling your money actually where to go. And it's not about how much you hope to spend, it's how much you have to spend, to give, to invest. Because the whole point of this kind of whole thing is transparently, if I'm being honest, is I'm grieved for people. My heart breaks. My goal as a pastor is to help us all follow Jesus better. And I say my family did a pretty decent job laying some foundations, but I have learned quickly over and over and over again that not many of us have a good relationship with money. And if the statistics are true of my journey of faith and is parallel to some of yours, then there is a battle going on for your heart. There's a battle going on for my heart and a majority of us as American Christians. And the number one thing fighting off God for the throne of our hearts is how we view, handle, give, save, spend money. So we desire to you experience freedom like never before. We want you to have faith that you've never seen in your own life before. We want you to make an impact that you didn't think you were even capable of making because the power of the Spirit is moving in you in such a new and palpable way. And yet, typically, statistically, the biggest cog in the spiritual artery of our heart, so to speak, is when it comes to God and our finances. Let me start with this interesting fact is that did you know that that the average American today is 90 times richer than the average individual throughout history? 90 times richer. Not one, not two, not 10-fold, 90-fold richer than the average person throughout history. And yet, what do we have today more than anything else? We have the highest rates of anxiety, stress, depression, and majority of people will mark down that finances have a big reason to do with that. The average American household gives an average of 2.5% to churches and charity at large. And you think, well, that's actually not bad. I might have thought that was closer to zero. Yet during the Great Depression, one of the most saddest, decrepit economic states of our country, that number was still 3.3%. It's believed that 80% of a church's giving oftentimes comes from 20% of its people. And that more than half of the households who consistently and regularly attend a church throughout a year never give a penny. All the while, the average American household has over $5,000 in credit card debt. There's just some things that are backwards, upside down, that show and paint this bigger picture that many of us have an unhealthy relationship with our finances. Because we live in a society where your paycheck says the most about you. Your investments are said to be your security. Your identity is a number of square footage or the certain logos that you have on your clothing. And in the midst of things like an inflation and housing bubbles that come and go every, decade or so, the question is, how do we remain or even start to live generous lives in the midst of this battle? God's point is simply this, is that your money matters. But he probably has a very different way in which how he views it and how he wants you and I to steward it. And he knows it's important to your health, your family's health, your church's opportunity to reach more people, and to your own spiritual flourishing. So I wanted to start here, just a little exercise, and whether you're taking notes and following along with us, or you can just draw this out on a scrap piece of paper. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how confident are you at handling your money matters? How confident in the way in which you approach your finances would you say, man, I know for a fact that I honor God with what comes into my pockets? If 0 was, it's my money, it's my way, I don't need anybody telling me what to do, and 10 is I am all in on it being God's money and I do it God's way, where would you say you fall kind of on this continuum? My money, my way, God's money, God's way. Truth of the matter is, most of us start at zero, and we have to learn over time that living generous lives, living shrewd lives, living financially wise lives, it's like building a muscle, that it takes time, it takes consistency, it takes intentionality to build and to flex that muscle over and over and over again so that it gets stronger. Yes, why? 1 out of every 6 verses in the gospel seem to point back to something related to money or possessions or our hearts that are following idols other than God. 6 out of the 38 parables include ideas of money or possessions, that Jesus talks more about money than he does faith and love. Perhaps it's because that he knows something about us all, is that nothing will compete quite like him in our lives than it is the money that comes our way. Simply put, another way to think about it is money is the greatest magnifying glass into our hearts. It reveals most quickly the state of our hearts, quite possibly more than anything else. So kind of the point that I think I see Jesus making when you read through his Gospels, when you read through Scripture, and you kind of just see, man, what is God's heart and mind when it comes to finances, is that Jesus doesn't need your money, but he does demand your heart. And we'll say it again. Jesus doesn't need your money, but he does demand your heart. And so this whole kind of mini-series equipping that we're putting together, it's not to guilt you. However, if you're like me, when you read the passages, when you seek the Spirit, there's definitely some conviction that comes, and I think that's a good thing. And I'm going to recommend that you listen to all of these, that you seek the Spirit and to obey where he might leads, because we are in this with you, and we are in this because Jesus desires your heart. And so this is my promise, is that this whole idea of money matters is foundational to our spiritual lives. That my goal is to help us realize that we can receive freedom like never before. That the stress and the anxiety that you feel when the idea of finances or bills come into your home, that there is actually ways for you to get out from under that. That money can be a joy and not a stressor. It can be a privilege and not a pain. But it starts by placing our trust in God with money his way. That there is a way to experience the King of the universe by saying, Jesus, it's all yours. And that I deserve the opportunity to find a wealth, a richness, a fullness beyond merely a dollar amount in my bank account. And so my challenge to you is going to be this. My challenge is to watch these next 3 sessions in order. Don't skip. In fact, you're probably going to want to. You're probably going to want to skip to one that maybe jumps at your heart the most. But our goal is for these next 3 sessions is to equip you how to give faithfully, how to spend righteously, and how to invest wisely. There's also going to be some helpful tools. There's some fill in the blanks, some notes for you to take and follow along, as well as some reflection questions to help these practical tools kind of deepen your relationship with money in a way that it matters to you and it matters to God. So I don't know if you're ready, but once you are, let's dive in and let's do this.